Let's bring you now all of the highlights from Prime Minister's questions, although actually this week it is Deputy Prime Minister's questions. Joining me right now is TalkTV's chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell. Good afternoon to you.
Julia.
And, of course, Benedict Spence is back in the studio as well. So, first question, as always, were there any highlights?
Yes, loads.
It
was
that
great.
was enthusiastic.
It was sort of insult central and far more entertaining than the usual sparring matches between Keir, Starmer and Rishi Sunak.
Because Rishi Sunak, of course, is over in Germany on this tour, defence tour of Europe. We've had Oliver Dowden step in. I
actually asked someone in number 10 about this and said, is it just a coincidence that Angela Rayner, who's under fire hugely for housing arrangements, is basically forced to do Deputy Prime Minister's questions against Oliver Dowden? And I got a reply which said, it's a complete coincidence, and then a wink emoji.
Oh, I love that. I would like you couldn't. I couldn't possibly. You might say that I couldn't possibly comment the older House of Cards line. Well, look, let's get straight.
Well, she went straight in. Yeah, she went straight in, and she started talking immediately about the controversy. And you've got to sort of front these things up. This was almost the first thing she said.
OK, well, let's have a watch and a listen.
Mr. Speaker, I know the party opposite is desperate to talk about my living arrangements, but the public want to know what this government is going to do about theirs. Natalie from Brighton has been served with 2 no-fault eviction notices in 18 months. She joins nearly 1 million families at risk of homelessness due to his party's failure to ban this cruel practice. Now, instead of obsessing over my house, when will he get a grip and show the same obsession with ending no-fault evictions?
Well, to begin with, it is a pleasure to have another exchange with the Right Honourable Lady in this House, our 5th in 12 months. Any more of these, and she'll be claiming it as her principal residence.
I'm sorry, that was I mean, all credit to Angela Rayner going in on this, although she's avoided media interviews, but that is an absolutely top line from Oliver Dowden.
Yes, it is, and she had
one later.
If I've got news for
you, we'll be repeating it.
She's got one in the next clip as well. But
don't ruin it.
I won't ruin it. But unsurprisingly, as not just the Shadow Deputy Prime Minister, but also the Shadow Housing Secretary, she had actually a ding-dong with Michael Gove yesterday. They did housing questions yesterday. She made almost every question, apart from one about defence at the end, she made almost every question about housing. So she's leaning into the controversy and also saying that things like no-fault evictions, which are very cruel for people.
Oh, no, you see, this is the thing. The no-fault evictions thing. No, because one of the reasons why people end up being evicted is because they give notice. They give a notice by the landlord, who's got every right. It's their own private property to give people notice as according to their contract. And then they say to the local council, I'm having to leave my property. And the local councils won't rehouse people until you've got the eviction notice.
OK.
This is a completely concocted thing.
It's not entirely concocted.
An awful lot of it is.
OK, well, there's a real lack of stability for a lot of people who want to have continuity in terms of kids' schools and all the rest of it. But listen,
does everyone remember what the motto of the show is? Remember? What's the... Build more houses. If we have more houses...
We can agree on that.
Yeah, we can agree on that. Right, let's get to the second clip then.
The second bit were more insults. I'll not ruin it, but it was pretty good, especially from Angela Rayner. She'd one that I think we're going to remember.
Watch and a listen.
After 14 years, they failed renters, they failed leaseholders, and they failed mortgage holders. But, Mr. Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
She once said, you shouldn't be waiting for the police to bang on your door. If you did it, then you shouldn't be doing your job. The Right Honourable Landlady should forget her tax advice and follow her own advice.
I have to say, I don't like the pint-sized loser line. You don't like the heightism? I just think, no, well, it's heightism. Yes, it's probably illegal. I mean, it's probably a hate crime. At the very least, it's a non-crime hate incident. I know, but that's not a clever. It's not a clever line. It's got to be clever, not just.
The Right Honourable Landlady is fairly
Right
clever.
Honourable Landlady is quite clever. I think Oliver Dowden may well have won those exchanges, but either way, very punchy.
Yes.
We're heading to local elections. We're going to have a general election later this year. It's going to get very, very, very punchy. I wonder how much. I mean, I love a good exchange in the House of Commons, but it's got to be witty. It's got to be clever. If it's just going to be an exchange of abuse, I think most voters just turn right off.
Well, the thing is that most people who see any parliamentary coverage at all will see Prime
Are they
Minister's
weirdos like us?
I'm afraid so. Well, no, the weirdos like
I'm
me.
Benedict. You're not getting out of this.
I watch the whole thing every week. I go back after talking to you. I go back and watch the bits I've missed.
Okay. Do you know what I do? I tape it at home.
You tape it.
It's tragic.
Yeah,
well, whatever you do with your newfangled things,
of course, yeah. No,
genuinely, no, I'm that tragic. I was a political editor for years. It's what you do, isn't it? You live for this stuff.
Do you ever do that thing where you watch on they run the coverage of the old elections?
No, I don't do that because I'm not completely sad.
That's the next level.
Peter is that sad.
That's the next
Benedict,
level.
what do you make of this? You're an ordinary voter. He is not an ordinary voter. No,
Yes,
what do you make of that
really
sort of exchange? Look, it's good and punchy. It's fun, but has any light been shed on anything?
I mean, I'm not sure very much light has been shed on it, other than that there are alternatives on the Conservative front benches to Rishi Sunak, and actually not necessarily all is lost, because as you pointed out, actually that was quite witty, and it's the sort of thing that I think most members of the public, even if they aren't, natural Conservative voters, would have a bit of a chuckle at as well. It's nice to see a bit of humanity there. But it's curious, isn't it, to see, I mean, we spoke about this last week, how actually Angela Rayner is a very good attack animal for the Labour Party. She's very talented, and to see her going on this issue, on housing, go, all right, you want to bring this up, I'm going to use it as a shield to batter you with. Very smart.
But it is also interesting that we've had the Labour Party again and again, guests on the show say, look, this story hasn't cut through. When you explain this story about Angela Rayner's old council house, she doesn't live in anymore, that she lived in before she was an MP, you go all the way. It takes you 2 paragraphs to explain the story and what the issues are of unpaid capital gains tax alleged and unpaid the council discount that should have been paid back. I mean, again, you're already going, yeah. It's all these other things, and a lot of we're told the public don't care. It's not cutting through. Now, polling has shown this is cutting through now. It's been in the news for 3 months now. People are aware of it. They might not understand all the nitty-gritty and the details, but they're aware of it. Now, is this damaging her? And if so, is Keir Starmer happy or unhappy about that? Because there's no love lost between these two.
Isn't it curious how Angela Rayner says that she has a piece of paper with legal advice on it saying it exonerates her, and the former chief prosecutor of this country, who is a King's Counsel, one of the senior lawyer, hasn't read it? Why hasn't he read it?
He's made open. He says, I don't need to see it.
He says, I don't need to see it, but there is clear blue water, clear red water perhaps, between Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. And actually, it was interesting, Emily Thornberry was talking to the station this morning, and she said, well, it's Angela's issue and she knows that it's all fine and so on. So there are various Labour figures, just a tiny bit of distance. If it all goes horribly wrong, they can say, well, she told us it was fine, but it's all down to her. So listen, it's not unhelpful for Keir Starmer to think that Angela Rayner, who let's remember is elected and he didn't choose and probably wouldn't have in his shadow cabinet if he had the choice, has got all these job titles, Deputy Prime Minister and lots of many others, including Shadow Housing Secretary. So yes, it's helpful for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, of course, Rishi Sunak is abroad at the moment. He's been in Poland making that big defence spending announcement, and he's now in Germany with the German Chancellor Scholz. Now, I wonder, though, in terms of this announcement, is this about sort of throwing red meat, this extra £75 billion up to 2030? Is that about throwing red meat to Tory party faithful who've been demanding this? Or is it playing electioneering games, which is that no one... there must be an extraordinary thing that would happen at some point before the next election, that Rishi Sunak would still be Prime Minister of this country, or even that the Tories would still be in office. So when he makes these sort of pledges, these sort of announcements, is this just basically yet another thing to try and tie the hands of a future Labour government, to put them in a difficulty where they'd have to renege on this pledge or they'd have to do some serious cutting of other spending departments?
Well, it's actually both those things you've talked about. It's the best kind of red meat. It's red meat you don't have to pay for. Someone else buying you a steak, definitely go to that dinner. So he's saying that over the next 5 years, this spending is going to go up to such a huge degree. As you say, Labour will have to make a political decision about that when they are, let's face it, almost inevitably in office. But in the last few days, Rishi Sunak has at least tried on 2 major fronts to get the electoral narrative back and to say the flights are taking off for Rwanda. And you know that thing that those backbenchers have asked for? I've just given it to you. Yeah. This money is going in. But the question is, where does it come from? And that question hasn't been answered yet. It certainly wasn't answered at Prime Minister.
And I haven't had a chance to talk to you since we've had that bill finally being passed. It's just receiving royal assent from the King to get those flights off to Rwanda. Still going to be waiting until July. Yeah. Lots of talk in Westminster, which I know is often a load of nonsense because they just all get into a huddle in the bar together and all come up with this nonsense about a summer election?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll happen in November because, first of all, you need money to run an election. You get a lot of that at party political conferences, but also the fact that they want to show that this is working. They don't want just to say the first flight is taken off, but regular flights are taking off, and they want to...
But they're also going to have all the boats coming over. If we have a mild summer, we're going to see tens of thousands of people arriving. 500 every day, more than you're going to be putting on a plane to Rwanda coming over the channel. So that's a risk as well. But I suppose cost of living crisis might hopefully ease more. Yeah,
I think the economic numbers will be better. That's always been the gamble for Rishi Sunak. But in terms of turning this around, look, he wants to be Prime Minister for 2 years. That'll happen in late October.
Oh,
that's why I think it's
He doesn't want one of those things when Liz Truss, when we interviewed her, when they put up Liz Truss Prime Minister September, October 2022 or something?
Yeah, I think yes, it was, yes.
Yeah,
just 1 year.
Benedict, you were not rolling your eyes, but you were looking...
When people talk about the cost of living crisis come down, I think you're very optimistic. Everybody's very optimistic if they think it is going to come down and not go back up.
Can I say point out, Benedict's trying to buy his first home right now, so he's very aware.
I'm incredibly hyper-cautious about any sort of good news. But I mean, you both say November. I still think it's going to be January. I think they're going to eke it out for as long as they can.
But Rishi Sunak has said it'll definitely be this year.
Yeah, but he said many things. He said a couple of days ago the flights for Rwanda would be in the spring, and now he's saying, days later it'll be in the summer.
No one feels well off in January.
No.
Nobody. You've got the heating on, your bills are mounting up, you spent money over Christmas.
That's right.
No one's got any money to go out. Yeah, that is not a good time. It's cold and rainy and miserable, even more so than April.
But also, do you want to campaign for an election in December? I'm not sure a lot about
I don't think the voters appreciate that.
Well, no, honestly, we're saying this, but actually, if numbers have gone up in terms of people crossing the channel, actually, if the cost of living crisis has not improved but got worse over the summer, then November would also be a very bad time. At the very least, a cold January election might suppress people coming out to vote for the Labour Party, which might be a way of looking at it.
It is a way of looking at it.
Okay,
yeah.
Right.
That's my view.
They're shouting at me, I've got to move on. Shut those two up. Paraphrasing. Pizza Carl.
Toned it down.
Pizza Carl, thank you very much. Always great having you in the studio.